Before we start, please support the channel, hit like, and subscribe. You can go ahead and sign now, Laura said, sliding the envelope across the dinner table like she was passing salt. Her voice didn't shake, too casual, too smooth. Almost like this moment wasn't meant to burn a hole through my chest. Denise, her oldest sister and our smug host for the evening, let out a little snort, barely hiding her smirk behind a wine glass. Heather, the youngest and loudest, giggled with a tilt of her head like this was all part of some inside joke I wasn't invited to. The table fell into a hush, every knife and fork suddenly still. The fajitas sizzled on the cast iron behind us, but the heat in the room had changed completely. I didn't look down at the papers. I didn't have to. I knew exactly what they were. Laura had been dropping hints for weeks. Distance here, a cold shoulder there. But this? A public ambush, handed to me at her sister's dining table, flanked by laughter? I reached slowly into my coat pocket, pulled out a pen, and placed it carefully next to the manila envelope. Then I looked at her. No anger. No pleading. Just one question. Are you sure? The room stiffened. Laura blinked, her confidence faltering for the first time. Her fingers twitched. I watched the pulse in her neck speed up. For a second, she didn't say anything. Then, with the grace of someone realizing too late she'd pushed a little too far, she snatched the envelope back like it had caught fire. The plastic smile cracked. Heather's laughter sputtered. Denise froze mid-sip. I stood. The chair legs dragged against the hardwood, slow and deliberate. I adjusted my sleeves, nodded politely to Denise, then to Heather, and finally let my eyes rest on Laura. If you're gonna play games, I said evenly, you better be prepared to lose. I turned and walked out of the dining room without looking back. They thought I'd break, that I'd plead or explode, maybe even crumble in front of everyone. Instead, I left them choking on their smugness. Laura still clutching those unsigned papers like a ticking bomb she didn't know how to defuse. __ that night, as I drove home down those dark suburban streets, the streetlights flicking shadows across the dashboard, I realized something strange. I wasn't hurt. Not in the way they expected. My name's Ethan Carver. I'm a civil engineer, 38 years old. I build bridges, quietly, precisely. I solve structural problems for a living. And tonight, I just spotted the first crack in something I thought was unshakable. Laura and I had been married 10 years. No kids. 2 cars. A tidy house on the northwest side of Houston. From the outside, we were the picture of stability. But when she slid those papers across the table, smirking like the punchline was mine, I saw it clear as day. She didn't want out. She wanted control. And when I didn't give her that reaction she rehearsed for, she panicked. Which tells me this story isn't over. Not by a long shot. The door clicked behind me like the final punctuation mark on a long, pointless chapter. I dropped my keys on the kitchen counter, peeled off my blazer, and rolled up my sleeves. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Laura hadn't come in yet, but I could feel her behind me already, ghosting around the edges, waiting to say something first. When she did, it wasn't an apology. You embarrassed me, she said, like she was scolding a teenager for mouthing off in church. I turned slowly, leaning against the counter. She was standing just inside the doorway, arms crossed, still dressed for dinner, red blouse too bright under the kitchen lights, earrings swinging as she shifted awkwardly. You handed me divorce papers at a dinner party, I replied calmly. Let's not pretend I was the one chasing drama. Laura huffed and walked over to the fridge like we were just having another Tuesday night disagreement. She grabbed a bottle of sparkling water, twisted the cap with a snap, and took a long sip. I wasn't going to embarrass you. I thought if I gave you the papers there, you wouldn't cause a scene. That wasn't a scene, I said, my voice flat. That was me being respectful. Something you seem to have forgotten how to be. Her jaw twitched. Don't turn this on me. I'm not turning anything, I said. But if you're serious, if that envelope means what I think it means, then let's not drag this out. I reached into the drawer beside me, pulled out the same pen I'd laid next to the papers earlier, and tapped it once against the granite countertop. I'll sign them. Right now? If that's what you want. That stopped her cold. She blinked at me, throat tightening. So that's it. No conversation? No fighting for us. You're just done? You handed me a decision, I said. Now I'm responding. Laura leaned back against the kitchen island, bottle dangling from her fingers. Her voice dropped into something softer, more dangerous. You know, Ethan, she gestured vaguely around us. This marriage hasn't exactly been a dream. You're always working, always checked out. You leave at 7, come home at 8, and when you are here, it's like your mind's still at the job site. I stayed quiet. You don't ask how I'm doing, she went on. You don't talk to me. Half the time, it's like I live alone. I nodded once, slowly. So, what you're saying is you felt invisible. She blinked, surprised. Yes. Then why? I asked gently. Did you make a show of the divorce? If you felt neglected, why not talk to me 6 months ago? Or a year ago? Laura looked down. The silence between us stretched long and wide across the kitchen tiles. You wanted a reaction, I said. That's why you involved your sisters. You didn't want honesty. You wanted an audience. No, she said quickly. Ethan, I wasn't trying to humiliate you. Then what were you trying to do? She didn't answer. The bottle cap spun nervously in her hand, clinking against her nails. You don't get to measure respect in portions, Laura. You don't get to disrespect me and then act like the victim when I don't fall apart on cue. Her eyes flared. You're twisting this. No, I interrupted. You are. You always have. I stepped away from the counter and took a breath, not angry, not loud, just steady. If you want out, I'll open the door. But if you're still here to prove a point, you should know. I paused. I'm not the same man you married. I'm not afraid to walk away anymore. Laura stood still, the weight of my words pushing into her. For once, she didn't deflect, didn't push back. She just stared at me across the kitchen, something unreadable settling in her expression. Not regret exactly, but maybe the very first thread of uncertainty unraveling. I set the pen down on the table, right where the papers would go. I'll be in the study. Bring the papers if you're sure. And then I left her standing in that echoing kitchen, her silence louder than anything she'd said all night. The next morning, I stood in my downtown Houston office, 9th floor, corner window, watching traffic crawl like blood through the veins of the city. Cars inching forward, people moving with purpose, everyone chasing something. I wasn't chasing anymore. They thought I'd crawl. I muttered to myself, the words almost catching on a grin. My office was quiet, sleek, organized. A reflection of who I'd become in the years. Laura used to say I was obsessed with work. She used to joke that I loved my blueprint software more than I loved her. But that software never lied to me, never handed me divorce papers in front of an audience. At 8:17 a.m., I picked up the phone and dialed the bank. Hi, this is Ethan Carver. I need to place a full freeze on all joint accounts with Laura Carver. Effective immediately. The woman on the other end didn't question me. My name carried weight with that bank. We've been clients for years. Quiet, predictable. Now, just business. By 8:23, our finances were untangled. Step 1, control restored. I opened a new account in my name only. Rerouted my direct deposit. Removed Laura from my payroll login. Then I leaned back in my chair, cracked my knuckles, and opened the employee roster. Step 2 was Heather. Heather, Laura's baby sister. 29, smug, loud, always 3 steps out of her lane. She'd gotten hired through a favor 2 years ago. HR assistant. Overpaid and underqualified. Most of the office tolerated her, but no one respected her. I pulled up her profile. Heather Carver. Employee ID number 2081. I clicked Initiate Termination. My assistant, Maria, knocked lightly on the door a few minutes later. You sure you want to go through with this, Ethan? She was never qualified for the job, I said without looking up. Now she's also a liability. Maria nodded once. She didn't ask any more questions. That's what I liked about her. By 9:05 a.m., Heather's system access was revoked. Security would escort her out by lunch. She wouldn't see it coming. That thought didn't bring me joy, but it brought me peace. Then came the final step. Denise. The queen bee. The one who laughed the loudest last night. Who toasted my humiliation like it was champagne. What Laura hadn't known, and what Denise had probably forgotten, was that her mortgage had my name on it. 2 years ago, when she was on the verge of foreclosure, I co-signed the condo loan to help her keep her place. Laura had begged me, swore it'd only be temporary. I opened the mortgage servicer's site, logged in, and clicked Suspend Autopay. Denise could cover her own home this month, or not. Either way, I was done. I leaned back in my chair, fingers laced behind my head, and stared out at the skyline. My reflection in the window looked unfamiliar, Sharper, colder. But not broken. This wasn't revenge. This was correction. The world they lived in, the one where they laughed behind my back, fed each other poisoned smiles, and treated loyalty like some outdated accessory, wasn't one I recognized anymore. And starting today, I wasn't playing by their rules. She burst into the room like she still owned it. It was past 7 p.m. I was in my study, tucked into the leather armchair by the bookshelf, scrolling through a stack of property files, pen tapping against the folder on my knee. The room smelled faintly of cedar and old paper. The lights were low, the kind I liked, quiet, intentional. And then she barged in, heels clicking like gunshots on the hardwood. "Ethan," Laura snapped, her voice sharp, panicked, too loud for the space. "What did you do?" I didn't look up right away. I just flipped to the next page. Let the silence work harder than any words. She marched toward the desk, waving her phone in one hand like it was evidence. "You froze the accounts?" "I can't access anything. The card declined at the pharmacy, Ethan. Do you know how humiliating that is?" I finally looked up. There was a frantic edge to her that hadn't been there before. Makeup slightly smudged under her eyes, her tone shrill. The flawless, controlled image she'd curated so carefully, cracking. And I could tell it wasn't just about the money. "You embarrassed me," she said again. But this time it sounded more like fear than fury. I rested the folder on the armrest and folded my hands. "You'll need to be more specific." Her jaw tensed. "You fired Heather." I nodded. "She worked under me, and she no longer met the standards of the company." Laura blinked fast, like she hadn't expected that answer to be so simple. "You cut Denise's mortgage payments, too." She should have read the cosigner clause. "I'm not her bank." Her voice faltered. "You can't just go around doing this." I tilted my head. Says the woman who served me divorce papers over dinner rolls. That shut her up for a beat. She looked away, then back again, chest rising and falling faster now. Her tone softened. "Tried to, anyway. Ethan, I didn't mean for things to go this far. I didn't think you'd react like this." "You thought I'd crawl?" "No," she said quickly. I thought maybe it'd wake you up. That it would force you to see how distant things had gotten. You've been so cold lately. Always working, always somewhere else." I leaned back, keeping my voice even. "You weaponized humiliation. And now you're asking me to pretend it wasn't real?" Her eyes welled. "I wasn't trying to hurt you. I was angry. Frustrated. Her voice cracked. "I didn't think you'd actually go through with any of this." I stared at her for a long moment. Then, quietly, I said the only thing that really needed saying. "Actions mean more than apologies." She froze. Her mouth opened slightly, like she was going to argue. But nothing came out. The line hit her harder than anything I could have shouted. Because it wasn't said with bitterness. It wasn't even said to wound. It was just the truth. Laura stood in the center of the study, small all of a sudden, like the walls had pushed in around her. Her arms dropped to her sides. The phone she'd been waving now hung limply in her hand. She looked at me like she was seeing someone she'd never really met. And maybe she was. Because for the first time in a long while, I wasn't reacting. I wasn't placating. I wasn't playing the role of the steady husband trying to make everything okay again. I was just done. Not out of hate. Out of self-respect. She backed up slowly, her breath uneven. Then she turned and left the room without another word, the sound of her heels fading down the hall. I went back to my folder, and the quiet returned like a reward. She showed up like a storm that didn't check the weather report. It was barely 9 a.m. The sun hadn't even warmed the driveway yet. I was standing in the kitchen with a mug of black coffee, watching condensation run down the window pane, when I heard the frantic pounding at the front door. I didn't rush to open it. I knew exactly who it would be. By the time I got there, Heather was already half yelling into the wood. When I swung the door open, she didn't miss a beat, waving the termination letter like a battle flag, and already halfway through a sentence. "Completely illegal, you know that, right? You think you can just pull this crap because you're bitter and got your ego bruised?" She stood on the porch in oversized sunglasses, hair up in a bun like she'd just rolled out of a disaster movie. Flip-flops smacking against the wood. No makeup, no filter, just raw rage. I leaned against the doorframe and took a slow sip of coffee. Didn't speak. Didn't move. "Oh, what?" she scoffed. "Nothing to say now? Big man with a corner office can't even look me in the eye after pulling that little stunt?" I finally spoke, voice low and even. "You were never qualified for the role, Heather. It was a courtesy. Now it's done. A courtesy, she barked. Is that what you call hiring your wife's sister and then throwing her out like trash when the marriage hits a bump? You're not a husband. You're a control freak. I crossed my arms. You're right. I should have ended it sooner. That was my mistake. Her jaw dropped slightly, and for a moment, I could see her sputtering. Not from hurt. Heather wasn't easily wounded, but from disbelief that someone had dared strip her of her imagined leverage. She stepped forward, eyes narrowing. You're pathetic. Seriously, you think this little power trip makes you look strong? Everyone sees it, Ethan. Everyone. You're just sad. And alone. Am I interrupting something? That voice, Laura's, cut through the air like a wire snapping. Heather and I both turned. Laura stood at the edge of the foyer, barefoot, hair slightly tousled, wearing one of my old flannel shirts over her pajamas. Her arms were crossed tightly, not with anger, more like embarrassment. Heather rolled her eyes. Oh, perfect. Laura, can you believe this? He actually fired me. Yes, Laura said, her tone sharper than I expected. And you should have been fired a long time ago. That stopped Heather. What? Laura stepped closer, voice steady now. You acted like that job was a joke. You barely showed up on time. You gossiped about coworkers, and you treated his name like your personal shield. I asked him to help you. And he did. More than once. And you threw it in his face. Heather blinked rapidly, the shock evident. You're taking his side? I'm taking the side of dignity, Laura said flatly. You don't come to my house and speak to my husband like that. My husband. The words echoed, soft, but undeniable. Heather's mouth opened, then closed. She looked from Laura to me, back to Laura again, trying to find a crack she could wedge into. But there wasn't one. Not anymore. This is insane, she muttered. You've completely lost it. Laura didn't answer. She just stared her sister down with the kind of cool disappointment that doesn't yell, it dismisses. Heather huffed, shoved the termination letter back into her bag, and stormed off the porch with a string of curses under her breath. The screen door creaked, closed behind me. I glanced at Laura. She was still looking down the driveway, arms folded tight. I broke the silence. You didn't have to do that. She turned to me, eyes tired but clear. Yes, I did. There was a flicker of something in her expression, conflict, maybe, a kind of internal shift. For a second, she looked like someone who had just realized the consequences of letting a match burn too close to the fuse. Then she walked past me, back into the house. No more words. But I felt it. The wind was changing. 2 days later, the doorbell rang like someone was trying to punish it. I opened the door to find Denise standing there, arms crossed, jaw clenched, fire in her eyes. Not dressed casually, no. Denise had chosen armor, sharp blazer, designer heels, and that expensive handbag she used when she wanted to feel taller than everyone else in the room. She didn't say hello. You froze my mortgage account. I nodded once. Correct. Her voice cracked like a whip. Are you out of your mind? You can't just cut off payments without warning. That's financial sabotage, Ethan. I stayed still in the doorway, arms at my sides. Calm. It's called stopping a voluntary contribution. I suggest you read the contract. Oh, don't give me that. You agreed to help when I needed it. You signed on. That's legally binding. It's not charity, I said evenly. And it's not indefinite. Especially not after what you pulled the other night. She took a step forward, voice rising. You think you can just play God with my life because your little marriage fell apart? Grow up. I lifted my brow just slightly. No, Denise. I think grown-ups pay their own mortgages. That landed. Her face flushed. The glare turned sharper, less righteous, and more exposed. Her power, like Laura's, had always lived in performance, volume, audience, smoke, and mirrors. But now, no more mirrors. Just a closed door and a quiet man who wasn't playing anymore. She stabbed a finger toward me. If you think you can humiliate me like this and walk away clean, you've got another thing coming. I have friends, Ethan. Lawyers. I didn't flinch. Then use them. But remember, I didn't take anything from you. I just stopped giving. And with that, I shut the door. Firm. Not loud. It didn't slam, but it felt like it did. I walked back into the living room, dropped onto the couch, and picked up the book I'd been halfway through. I didn't get 10 seconds in before I heard their voices, Laura and Denise, muffled but rising from the kitchen. You let him do this? Denise hissed. I didn't let him, Laura replied quietly. He made a choice. One I can't exactly argue with. Denise's heels clacked, You're siding with him? There was a long pause. Then Laura said it. He's not wrong. Silence. I didn't move. I didn't eavesdrop. I just listened as the last of the sisters' unity started to pull at the seams. Denise left a few minutes later, the door slamming behind her this time. Laura didn't come into the living room right away. But when she did, she didn't look at me like an opponent anymore. She looked thoughtful. Not sorry. Not soft. But quieter. And that quiet said everything. The tide was changing, not in waves, but in inches. The porch was quiet, the kind of quiet that only happens when two people run out of performances. It was just past 9 p.m. The sky of faded navy blankets stretched over the Texas suburbs. A couple of cicadas buzzed out in the trees. The wind was soft, uninterested in anything dramatic. I sat in my usual spot, old wooden chair, glass of red in hand, watching shadows stretch across the lawn. Laura stepped out barefoot. She didn't say anything at first, just walked over to the other chair, the one opposite mine, and sat down slowly like the air might break if she moved too fast. She held her own glass of wine, untouched. I wanted to talk, she said after a long pause. I nodded, not looking at her. You usually do. She winced slightly at that. I deserve that. More silence. She stared out at the same trees I'd been looking at, but her mind was clearly somewhere else. I've been thinking, she finally said, about how we got here. How I got here. I didn't reply. I just let the space stay open. I let things fester, Ethan, she admitted. I let little annoyances turn into narratives. I convinced myself you didn't care, because it was easier than admitting I never said anything out loud. Her voice was low, careful, not the sharp-edged Laura from weeks ago. This one didn't come armed. I resented you, she went on, for being so steady, for not reacting, for not falling apart when I did. That got my eyes off the horizon. I turned to her. You wanted me to fall apart? She looked straight at me, and for once, her eyes didn't flinch. Not fall apart, but maybe show me that I could still shake you. I didn't say anything. She took a sip of wine and stared into the glass, then continued. I thought if I pushed hard enough, you'd come chasing after me. That you'd yell, or beg, or something. Instead, you got stronger. You pulled away. No, I said quietly. I just stopped pretending. She nodded. Yeah, I see that now. I watched her for a moment longer, trying to read if this was another angle, another performance. But there was nothing clever in her voice. Just exhaustion. Then came the part she had been circling around all night. I'm sorry, she whispered. For the dinner. For the way I dragged my sisters into it. For how calculated it must have felt. It was ugly. It wasn't who I want to be. I swirled the wine in my glass slowly, watching the moonlight catch the rim. Then I said, calmly, it's not about apologies, Laura. I know, she whispered. I know it doesn't fix anything. I looked at her. Forgiveness isn't something I'm ready to hand out like coupons, I said. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Her hands tightened around her glass, but she nodded again. The crickets filled the pause for us. She looked over at me. Her voice barely made it past the air between us. Is there still hope? The question didn't surprise me, but the sound of her asking it, that shook something loose in me. Not pity, not anger, just a quiet ache for what could have been if different choices had been made months, maybe years ago. I didn't answer. I let the silence sit with us, thick and honest. Because sometimes, no answer is the only answer that tells the truth. Morning broke slowly, filtered through the blinds in stripes of dull gold. I was at the kitchen table with my usual, black coffee, quiet phone, no expectations, when my inbox chimed. The subject line was simple. Enjoy. H. I didn't recognize the sender's address at first, but the signature was unmistakable. Heather never missed a chance to be smug. I clicked it open without hesitation. Just a video file, no message. But it didn't need one. The title said everything. Laura, Friday night, 1:12 a.m. I tapped it. The screen lit up with the dim blur of a phone camera. Party music thumped somewhere in the background. Loud, drunk voices, flashes of red Solo cups, and too much skin. The room was Heather's. I recognized the framed print over the dresser, the obnoxiously bright rug she used to brag about getting at a discount. And there, in the middle of it all, was Laura, dancing, laughing, leaning against a man I didn't know. Tall, loose tie, his hand low on her back. She smiled up at him, said something I couldn't hear. Then, With the kind of ease that only comes from familiarity or disregard, she kissed him. Not a drunken stumble. Not a dare. Intentional. Slow. Like she'd done it before. I watched her lips linger. Watched her fingers slide across his collar like they belonged there. And then I closed the video. No anger. No shaking hands. No crushed glass in my chest. Just quiet. The kind that comes when everything clicks into place. The second email came 30 seconds later. Still think she's worth it? Slightly smiling face, I didn't respond. Heather was baiting me, hoping for a storm. She wanted me to rage, to spiral, to give her another performance she could sink her teeth into. But I'd already lived that version of myself. I didn't rage. I opened my secure contacts, tapped my attorney's name, Derek Knox, a friend I trusted more than anyone in my corner, and typed, "Need to move forward. Full dissolution. Infidelity confirmed. We'll call in 10. Then I set the phone down, poured another cup of coffee, and stared out the kitchen window. Across the street, a neighbor was walking her dog. Somewhere down the block, a lawn mower hummed to life. The world, uncaring, kept turning. And me? I was done. Not because of the kiss. Not even because of the betrayal. But because she'd looked me in the eyes under the stars and asked if there was still hope, while knowing this video existed. While knowing Heather had it. While gambling on the idea that I'd never see it. I finished my coffee in silence, letting it all settle. And the strange thing? It didn't hurt like it should have. It felt like symmetry. Heather had always played games. Laura had always used silence like a weapon. And now, they'd used each other. They'd finally tipped their hand. I didn't need revenge anymore. I just needed closure. And I was ready to sign the last page. The suitcase sat by the hallway wall all afternoon. Quiet. Unassuming. Just black canvas and a worn leather handle, packed neat and zipped tight. By the time the sun dipped below the rooftops and the house turned blue with shadow, I was sitting in the living room. Lights off. Just the faint glow from the hallway and the soft hum of the ceiling fan. Laura came in from the back porch, barefoot, hair tied back in a loose knot. She looked tired, or maybe just uncertain. She had that wine glass in her hand again, but it stayed full. When she saw me sitting there, she hesitated. "Hey," she said gently, like she didn't want to wake something dangerous. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I looked up and asked the question slowly, carefully, like placing glass on a table. "Do you know what Heather sent me?" Her entire body stilled. The breath caught in her chest before she could hide it. Her fingers tightened around the glass. She didn't move, didn't speak, but I saw it. The recognition, the shame blooming behind her eyes. It was all there in the silence. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, and met her frozen gaze. "Do you know what I saw?" Laura opened her mouth, closed it. Then finally, barely audible, she said, "Ethan." I nodded, already knowing that was her answer. She stepped forward, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean for you to find out like that. I didn't even know Heather had that video. It was a stupid night, okay? Just a mistake." I didn't flinch. "You kissed him like it wasn't." She put the glass down on the coffee table, fast, like her hands couldn't hold anything anymore. It wasn't serious. I wasn't thinking clearly. I was upset, and we'd had that fight, and Heather was going on and on about how I should reclaim my power, and I was stupid. Her voice cracked on the last word. "I messed up," she said, "but I never stopped loving you." That line might have meant something once, but tonight, it hung limp in the air. "You lied," I said calmly. "Every night since that party. You sat across from me. You asked for forgiveness. You looked me in the eyes and left that part out." Laura dropped to her knees in front of the couch, like her legs gave out. She grabbed the edge of my jeans, gripping like she could keep me from drifting away. "I didn't know how to fix it," she whispered. "I was ashamed. I thought if I could get back to you, if I could undo everything, I wouldn't have to lose you." Her tears hit my shoes. She clutched at me with both hands now, sobbing hard into the quiet room. "I'll cut everyone off," she begged. "Heather, Denise, all of them. I'll go to therapy. I'll confess everything. I'll do whatever it takes. Please, just don't leave. I need you, Ethan. I don't want to lose us." I looked down at her. She looked so small in that moment. So human. And maybe, for someone else, that would have been enough. But not for me. Not after everything. I stood slowly, forcing her hands to slip away. She looked up, panicked, following me with her eyes. "Wait, what are you doing?" I walked to the hallway, picked up the suitcase, and returned. I placed it gently on the floor beside her. I already signed with the lawyer, I said, quiet and clear. Laura's hands flew to her mouth. She shook her head violently. No, Ethan, please. We can come back from this. We've been through worse, haven't we? No, I said. We haven't. She crumpled to the floor again, arms wrapped around her knees, rocking slightly. I can't believe this, she sobbed. I can't believe you're really doing this. I walked to the door, opened it wide, and stood there, waiting. Not angry, not triumphant, just done. I loved you, she whispered through the tears. I turned back one last time. And you played me like a pawn, I said. Now the board's clear. I stepped outside. The air was cool, the sky above empty. And as I pulled the door shut behind me, the click echoed like punctuation at the end of a long sentence. Inside, I heard her sobbing, muffled now, distant, like a song fading on the radio. But I didn't stop walking. Not once. It had been 3 weeks since I shut the door behind me for the last time. The silence in the house had changed. It used to feel like waiting. Now it felt like peace. No heels echoing down the hallway. No sharp laughter from speakerphone calls with Denise. No passive sighs from the other room. Just the rustle of trees in the backyard, the ice settling in a glass of whiskey, and the gentle creak of the porch swing beneath me. That swing had become my sanctuary. Mornings with black coffee, evenings with amber heat in a tumbler, and a kind of stillness I hadn't known I'd missed. Then came the updates. I never asked, never pried. But mutual friends, neighbors, co-workers who couldn't resist a little gossip, made sure the stories found me. Apparently, the Carver sisters weren't holding up well. Heather had blamed Denise for stirring the pot too much at the dinner party. Claimed she'd only sent me the video because Denise told her I'd already moved on emotionally and deserved to see the truth. Denise, in turn, blamed Heather for weaponizing family. Said Heather's pettiness ruined any chance Laura had at salvaging her marriage. Rumor has it they haven't spoken in 2 weeks. Laura, from what I heard, tried to patch things up, reached out to both sisters, desperate to restore what little foundation she had left. But the video sealed her fate. No amount of apologies could unburn that bridge, and no one wanted to carry her anymore. She had left me, but she hadn't planned for what came next, being alone. They say she's moved in with a cousin out in Katy. Started picking up shifts at an interior staging firm. No more designer wine nights, no more weekend brunches with the girls. Just long drives, small apartments, and smaller conversations. I didn't take pleasure in it, but I didn't feel sorry either. That was the price of playing with fire and thinking you'd never get burned. I took another sip of whiskey, leaned back into the swing, and closed my eyes. The air was cool. The porch light buzzed softly behind me. And for the first time in a long while, my house actually felt like mine. There was no victory dance, no celebration, just peace. And in this life, that's more than enough. The sun was starting to dip low when I found myself driving through Denise's neighborhood. It wasn't intentional. I'd taken a side street to avoid traffic and ended up cruising down that quiet cul-de-sac where the air always smelled like lawn chemicals and entitlement. I hadn't been back since everything blew apart. The houses all looked the same. Those oversized stone facades, big driveways with expensive cars parked out front, neighbors who waved too fast and smiled too wide. Manufactured peace. And then I saw her, Heather, bent over her front lawn in a ratty tank top and gym shorts, stabbing at a bag of soil with a small garden trowel like it had insulted her. Her hair was piled messily on her head, one side already slipping loose, and her expression was soured into something permanent, bitter, tense, defeated. She hadn't noticed me yet. I slowed just enough for the tires to crunch gently on the road, rolled down the passenger side window, and let the breeze carry my voice. Thanks for saving me the trouble. Her head whipped around. At first, confusion. Then recognition. Then pure, unfiltered rage. You smug little, she started, throwing the trowel down. I chuckled and rested one arm out the window. You always did have a flair for timing. You just aimed it at the wrong people. Heather stormed toward the curb, fists clenched. You think you're some kind of hero now? Walking away like you're better than all of us? No, I said, still smiling. I just walked away. That was the difference. She reached down and scooped a clump of dirt from the flower bed, probably meant to make some grand, messy statement, and hurled it across the sidewalk with an angry grunt. It splattered against the street, missed the car entirely, I raised an eyebrow. You've got the aim of your morals. She shouted something I didn't catch, probably for the best, but I was already rolling the window up and easing forward. Didn't need to hear the last word. Didn't need to explain mine. In the rearview mirror, I saw her standing there, dirt still in one hand, watching me drive away like she wanted the world to rewind. But life doesn't do rewinds. It just moves forward. And so did I. And that was the end of the story. Laura said she kissed that man because she was angry and wanted to feel something again. But was it honesty, or just another excuse to run from the damage she caused? Did she do the right thing by confessing, or was it already too late to matter? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, don't forget to like and subscribe. I've got a lot more to tell.